Glad to have you back. Now, that Nigeria's electioneering process is far from ideal is not news. But what is news now is that since 2007, some Nigerian politicians have allegedly been contracting data mining firm Cambridge Analytica to manipulate voters' decision and ultimately the outcome of elections in the country.
Now, Cambridge Analytica, according to reports, worked with Israeli hackers who were instructed to get dirt on Muhammadu Buhari, then leading opposition candidate during the presidential campaign. Now, following these revelations brought to light by Cambridge Analytica's co-founder and now whistleblower Christopher Wiley, the Nigerian government has set up an in-house committee to investigate the matter.
But the PDP is demanding the extension of the investigation to cover the sources of the funds used by the APC for President Buhari's campaign in 2015 on the backdrop of the list released by Minister of Information Lai Mohammed. Of course, majorly members of the opposition party PDP are on the two lists released by him.
All right, let's get into the discussion proper. We have joining us Dr. Akin Onigbinde, the senior advocate of Nigeria. You're welcome to the program this morning.
Good morning.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Right. Now, let's start with the issue of the hacking and all of that before we go into the issue of the list that we talked about. Now, Cambridge Analytica is, one would say, is a renowned company across the world, or agency, as the case may be, but being involved in the election in Nigeria, it seemed to be a new phenomenon to Nigerians. They've not heard this before. Now, if it is found to be true, like what happened in US or happened in parts of other parts of the world, what is Nigeria left to do at this point?
Well, very many times you hear such cliches as the world is a global village. You hear people say this is a digital world. But it does not dawn on us the true implication of digitalization. It is that what used to be your privacy, becomes exposed, in certain back offices, such that there's truly no privacy the moment you put yourself, on the internet domain. People are swift to join Facebook, to open all these accounts, online, and so on. But they don't understand that there are back offices where this information are processed and you are not privy to what is being done there, and so on. So we shouldn't be surprised, that an organization like Cambridge Analytica, whose job is to manage and deal with such data, and with the level of digital development that we have in Nigeria, we are still at the elementary stage. You can see what in the news has been done to the campaign processes in the US. Yes. US is the home of digital technology. It is there you have the Silicon Valley. It is there you have the Microsofts of this world. It is there you have Facebook, and so on. And yet, it was possible for a company sitting in the UK to access people's profiles. And so digital technology has a direct impact on the issues of personal and national security. And in those advanced countries, when they're talking about security, they are not talking of only guns and bombs. They also have units that deal with digital risks, which they are exposed to. There are times when you hear on the news that some hackers have entered the systems of some banks outside the country. They can attack aviation, systems. They can go
WannaCry recently.
And so on. So it's not enough to build airports. It's not enough to have the central bank. What is the cybersecurity environment that is created, to govern and to monitor what is happening in those places? So we shouldn't be surprised. If it can happen in the US, if it can happen in the UK, there's nothing that makes us immune
In fact, the scare now is that maybe it's been happening, but the fact that this came out is why we are discussing about it. But how ready is Nigeria really to protect itself if a country as big and as exposed as the United States of America couldn't even do it?
Well, that is exactly the point that I'm making, that this is just a wake-up call for organizations, individuals. I mean, some people, on their Facebook accounts, if they drank tea this morning, it's on Facebook. They showed the picture of their children. Hey, it's not only our friends that look at all of this information. Kidnappers also see, these photographs. They can tell exactly who your children are in the school, and so on. From our personal lifestyle as a people, there are certain things that are supposed to be private and personal to people. I don't know, maybe I don't understand why people put the entirety of their life, online.
Maybe they want to be popular.
Oh, popular. Popular among both honest and dishonest people. Then, as a country, we need to up our games in terms of what infrastructure do we have for the police, for our security agencies, not only to deal with brick and mortar crimes, but to deal with soft issues of technology, access, and so on. And when we are hiring, remember the gentleman, that brought out the whistleblower that what used to be a contractor. So who do we contract? In a situation where we're going to build our strategic institutions and our strategic infrastructure, and it is only foreigners that are contracted, to do these things. How they have the blueprint, they have the designs, they have, you don't even know what they have installed in course of doing the construction. These are issues which should be of concern, to everybody, both at the personal, corporate, and national security levels.
All right. Now, moving away from the Cambridge Analytica, another issue there is the issue of funding of elections generally. We know that the law gives powers to INEC to regulate how much funds political parties and candidates are supposed to spend for election and all of that. Going into 2019, INEC over the years seemed to be, that is an area INEC doesn't really seem to go into, regulating political parties, telling them and conscientizing or creating awareness. I said, this is the limit, this is the ceiling, you can stop funding political parties and all of that. Now, but we've not had anyone also taking INEC to court or taking a political party to court to say you overshot your limit and so on.
Now, until recently when we had the BVN regime, and then the single treasury account regime, that makes it difficult for people to deal with cash of a particular threshold. Nigeria used to be an open cash economy. People carry humongous amount of money around, physical cash. And therefore, it becomes it's impossible to track who is carrying what money for what purpose. And they're not going to share it in the open market. It is always behind doors, and so on. One of the key things of policy that the country should put in place and insist on is this money tracing. When you use money for money, when you launder money, dirty money, money proceeds of crime, the only reason they are able to deal with those problems, in other parts of the country is that there is an effective digital tracking. If you're taking out $200,000, they can follow the trail. Where does this money end up?
Follow the money.
You see, and it is not going to be possible for you to distribute those monies, without agencies. Like I was saying, security agencies should also have a unit that monitors. I mean, when you get, to UK and you say you want to take £10,000, they look at you and say, £10,000 physical cash, what do you want to do with £10,000? And whether you are aware of it or not, there are some people that are tracking what you are doing with your money. You can't use your money to come and destabilize their society. In the same way, INEC, as part of its responsibility should insist that political parties, whether at the local government, state, or should have bank accounts. People should not run political parties, you know, from their pockets and from their vaults. Any expenditure, any spending that has to do with political process has to be documented. And where there is proof or there is evidence from third parties or whistleblowers that money is being spent outside what is the legitimate treasury of the party, then INEC can swing into action. But I'm not sure whether INEC has a system today that monitors expenditure for political processes. No. Until we do that, until we improve our BVN system, our money tracking system, it will always be possible for people to go over and above the limits, you know, that are, you know, set, you know, for political party activities. Okay.
But beyond the insistence by INEC that political parties should have official accounts, do you think that that would even be effective if put in place, knowing that political parties could still choose not to put a lot of money into such accounts so that they would still be operating under the radar, understanding that Nigeria operates politics of money, really, with the new revelation that the PDP governors that defected to the APC donated about 100 million naira each to the party. So how do you really balance this? How do you ensure that political parties do not spend beyond the required amount?
You see, the point I'm making is this. Before we had BVN, so many things were possible. Now, some things are no more possible. The question of having regulation and standard for political spending cannot be the sole responsibility of INEC alone. You see, we in Nigeria must make up our mind the kind of democracy that we want to build. All right? If the practitioners cut corners, abuse systems, look at the list of corruption that we are talking about. The big parties, PDP is releasing its own list, APCs. What does that tell us? Is that it's a difference between 6 and half a dozen. The citizens, the political parties themselves must agree that there has to be threshold to political. And if they won't do that, then the civil society, who are the ultimate, you know, sufferers of the consequences of this type of, must be ready, you know, to provide. It's a digital world. If you can produce proof that people are sharing money somewhere, and it's easy these days, we must bring forth those type of information for the law enforcement agencies, for the regulatory agencies, which is INEC, and then put it on the back of INEC to make sure that they prosecute any such abuses.
Yeah, but, yes. But besides that, INEC has to be, because when it comes to the law, INEC is the one with the powers. Our INEC is the one that has been empowered by the law to do that. Yeah. So if INEC certainly wouldn't have the capacity to do that, they need to be able to engage either agencies or even the citizens themselves, like you said. But is INEC really doing that?
Well, INEC is not a completed story. INEC still has a lot of improvements, you know, to do about its functions, its regulatory, you know, duties, and its capacity. INEC is funded from the first line charge. All right? They get their money. They are the people to go and sit down and rationalize and think up, you know, the system that they intend to use as one of the flanks of their operation that is not yet covered at this time. Yes, they have money for printing of voters register. They have money for paying allowances. But do they have a unit? Do they have the capacity within the system to be able to track those types? If they don't have, it will then be their responsibility to set up. But then even if INEC does that, just like you have police having responsibility to prosecute, but you still, if somebody has information and he holds it back, you know, from police, there's not much that police can do. It is always an abiding responsibility on the part of citizens to volunteer information. Like the writer said, the price of liberty is always eternal vigilance. If we want a stable democracy, if we want a democracy that is not based on cash and carry, then it will become a responsibility for all of us. You see, but we cannot be glad to share some of this money that we are complaining about in one breath and be complaining that politics is monetized. You cannot, you know, eat your half and cake it, like one of my friends would say.
Okay, but because it seems to many Nigerians, and it seems to be a common notion that the country runs politics of poverty, that the people are impoverished so that they won't be able to demand for their rights. And you just made an inference to that now. So the civil society now is not even empowered enough to question the political class. So in the incident of a political fundraiser, for example, during the administration of Goodluck Jonathan, it happened. So how do you, as a political party, how do you even put a cap that, okay, donors, I don't want enough, I have got to that point. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do understand.
So how do you even check yourself, really? Do they even want to check themselves?
You see, some of these things raise fundamental philosophical questions about our values as a people. There are people who are poor in their homes. They are hungry. Their children are impoverished, but they won't steal. They won't steal not because they are not hungry. They won't steal because they believe it is against their conscience. All right? So poverty can never be an explanation for bringing down the threshold of morality, either in the life of an individual or that of a state. Now, when you look at South Africa, during the years of their struggle, you know what happened in Soweto, you know what happens to the black. But then, you know they are very serious about their human rights fight. It is not because anybody is able to assuage, you know, the suffering, that suffering still continues today. There's still a gap between the developed side and the undeveloped. But yet, their political party is a very virile political party. See what they did to Zuma recently. And you recall that even Thabo Mbeki was taken out of office by party. You see, we cannot, you know, continue to live in sin so that grace will abound. It doesn't happen. We must insist that there are certain minimum standard of moral conduct that we are going to accept. And the people have that responsibility. Yes, and the people have that responsibility. You cannot use poverty. You know, somebody says, okay, take 10 Congo of rice, and you know that in exchange for that Congo of rice, you'll be selling your birthright. You have a choice. It may be difficult, but by the time all of us make the sacrifices that are required, the political system is going to change. All right, going forward now, because we don't have all the time, if you compare build up to 2015 election and build up to 2019 election, even though we still have a year ahead of us, but do you think things are going to change from the way it used to be in the previous narratives? Yeah. You see, the political environment in Nigeria has changed over the years. I'm not just a senior advocate of Nigeria. I've been Speaker of Oyo State before. And I remember clearly that I have no recollection of spending the kind of money that is being bandied around as requirement to contest and win an election. There's no doubt that the influence of money had become so pervasive, debilitating, destructive to the political process today that looking at what has happened in the past and what we're expecting in the next, I do not have any serious reason to think things will change. You see, the reason is this. Where people break the law or where people benefit, you know, from a state of affairs and there is no consequence, there is no penalty, you encourage impunity. People will continue. That's when we're in primary school, they say don't cross the lawn. You can remember. Yes. If you cross the lawn, usually crossing the lawn is a shorter route to your destination. But if you cross the lawn and you cut grass for 2 days, the next time you won't cross the lawn. You kneel and apologize to Mr. Grass. Yes. So until there is consequences, there are consequences for breaches. Until people lose their seats, you know, for those type of abuses. we'll still continue the same game.
All right, Dr. Akin Onigbide, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you very much for your time on the show today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.